Today we're going to add more to the basis that we started last week. We briefly reviewed Illustrator and its interface and some of the basic tools. So I'm going to go a little more in depth with you on some of the tools that you'll need to complete your assignment and review project one, which is the podcast cover. So let's begin. This is available to you in the assignments tab on Canvas as well as in our modules. Again, we're making a podcast cover for, artwork for a podcast is something seen on Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. You can redesign an existing podcast or make a new one of your choice. And we're using Illustrator to create vector graphics. We're using text, right, paired with these graphics and images to illustrate something visually interesting. Consider things not just like your layout or design, right? The composition, right? Which includes space, line, color, and shape, but as well as the typeface or font that you'll be using. Remember that I need at least 10 pre-sketches here before you start producing your project. These, of course, are the other parts that we're going to be reviewing today: the vector paths, vector shapes, typeface blending modes, and what have you. The rubric is available to you online. So I'm just going to start with letter size, one of our presets here. If you want to start a new document it doesn't necessarily have to be an 8.5 by 11, you would go to File, New, and this is what the new document dialog box looks like. You can see there's a lot of presets up here, right? Mobile presets that have to do with, I'm on a Mac, right? So it's talking about Apple products with the iPhone. They also have Android presets. There's web presets, whether you're trying to make icons, things like that. Print presets, whether it's, letter size down to business card size. Really nice art and illustration presets as well. If you ever find yourself with a little extra time or you're a little bored, I highly recommend messing around with these templates to see how to do other stuff in Illustrator other than what I'm showing you or building off of what I'm showing you. But I just wanted to show you what the new document dialog box looks like. You can see here that under recent it has letter because that's the last one that I picked. If you want to make it your own dimensions, of course, you can title it here. You can change this to inches and include your own length and width here. Very similar to Photoshop's in terms of how you can begin this. Some nice options here, of course, is that you can change it to RGB or CMYK depending on what the final product would be. Raster effects and what have you, right? It's bleed. How many artboards you may want on your page. I'm just going to work with what we already opened, but I just want you to be aware of that new document dialog box. I'm using the Essentials Classic view. We did review this last week. You can change your view by going under Window, Workspace, and seeing what the other workspace looks like. There's plenty to pick from. My preference is Essentials Classic. I really like being able to see everything that I need to here, where I have my tools on the left and I have plenty of panels open on the right to work with. And I one of the things that I don't like is when I work in a workspace such as Essentials, I have to really find all of the things I'd want to modify individually by opening panels in the view. Or under Window and having these other panels join in. It's kind of irritating for me to have to find which panels to work with in order to modify certain objects or something. So I just I prefer to work with Essentials Classics. It's just already so many options for you to work with here. So we briefly reviewed this last week. So again, in Illustrator, everything you make is a vector shape. So if I draw a square, I now have a square on my artboard, right? And I can, of course, fill it by simply clicking this. This again is for its stroke, which we can also change. The stroke here is a little small, so I can also make it larger, and now you can see this stroke around my box. So for starters, Illustrator, that's kind of how you think of things, is in terms of its fill and its stroke, right? The thickness of that stroke. You can remove the stroke by selecting this preset here, which is none. And you can see now that there is no stroke around our object. You can also click this arrow, just like, let's make this bigger again so you can see it. You can also click this arrow, just like in Photoshop, to switch your colors between your fill and your stroke, which is pretty nice. I'm going to go back to our original one. So there's also this preset here in your color picker area with gradient, and you can see here that when I select gradient, my gradient options will automatically open up in this panel on the right here. So you can move with how you can see how moving this mark in the center shows where the largest transitions are, and of course you can move the bottom markers as well. We can change the color simply by clicking on that. All right, and we can of course do that here as well. We'll pretend that that looks super great. All right, so that's our quick option over here for gradient fill. Bear in mind that if you select this option, any of these presets down here, it's going to be working with the color swatch that's in the front. So if I were to have this stroke as what I'm working on, and I select this gradient, then the stroke will be what's affected, not the fill. So if you can't see what your gradient's doing, bear in mind that perhaps you have the wrong thing selected here, and you're doing it with your stroke as opposed to your fill. Okay. There's some other really cool options here with our gradient. With how it's made here. Let's go back to our fill so you can see a little better. So here are some other gradient options here where you can work with how the gradient works. It's really nice modification options. And then this one's really great. This is a freeform gradient, and you can move these parts around. You can increase how large it spreads. You can, of course, change the color and move that around. Really interesting ways to be able to make a really specific gradient that's what you're looking for here. So really awesome options here. I'm just going to go back to my regular fill for these. Okay. So with the direct selection tool, which is our black arrow, you can of course drag your object around your artboard. You can scale it and change its size. Similar to Photoshop, if you hold shift as you are scaling, if you hold shift, what are we doing, buddy? If you hold shift while you're scaling, it will keep its proportional size as you make it larger or smaller, which is really nice. And you can also round the corners really easily. You can see these little circular objects in our corners. That's to control how you can round these to make it, more of an oval, or even just a mild rounding, if that's something you would want to do. The direct selection tool is our white arrow, and with the direct selection tool, we can click on individual anchor points to manipulate them. You can always delete an anchor point if you want by clicking this remove selected anchor point option when you have one selected. So let's select that one. And now we have a triangle. You can still round the corners here just like you can with the other menu. Now you can, just make it straight. Okay, you can duplicate it, your objects, similar to how you would in Photoshop, simply by pushing Alt while you drag. And you can duplicate this object. It's a really easy way to be able to make a quick pattern in Illustrator when you have a shape that you like and you're able to start, having an ideation of a pattern that, would work really well. So I just did that super quick. Bear in mind, if you're doing anything like this, you can see here how parts of my objects are bleeding off of my artboard. That will not be in your finished file when you export it. So if anything's bleeding off of the edges of your document, that will not be in your finished product. The only thing that will be in your finished product is on the artboard itself. If you notice that if I click in my layers panel here, that all of our objects are on layer 1. Layer 1 is also labeled blue, which I'll go over more a little bit later, how you can use that to identify which layer you're working with. But you can see here that our objects are outlined in blue. They correspond with the layer that they are a part of. So different than Photoshop, these layers still work in the sense of keeping you organized, locking things, turning them invisible. But if you want in Illustrator, everything can be on one document, on one layer, excuse me. You can open your layer panel to see everything that is on your layer 1 to work with the individual objects and see all the shapes and paths and objects that you have in layer 1. All right, so that's the shape tool. All the shape tools pretty much work the same, whether you're using the rectangle, the ellipse tool, rounded rectangle, right? These are all very similar. If you hold shift if you hold shift while you're making, a circle, you can make a perfect circle. My keyboard's not working on here. Let's try again. If you hold shift, you can make a perfect circle. All right. The next shape I want to review with you is the star tool, which is also in your shape tools. And generally speaking, this is the pre-selection for Illustrator is with a 5-pointed star. You can double click on the star to see its properties. Let me have my, you can see here that I didn't have my tool selected. I had my selection tool, and so it wasn't opening this panel. And you can see here that it has a description of 2 radius as well as how many points the star has. Radius 1 has to do with the distance between the center of the star to its tippiest tip. And then radius 2 has to do with the center of the star to its innermost corners. And as I said, the default is usually 5 points. You can increase how many points your star has. You could perhaps bring in the radius 2 to make it super spiky, maybe firework looking. So let's see, it's at 94. You will see here that another aspect of their default is generally that radius 1 is double the length of radius 2. So it gives it that really balanced, full looking star. So if I make radius 2 smaller, it's really going to draw the points of that star in a lot more. I'm just going to make this a little smaller here with it. All right, so now you can see it has more of a firework shape. There's more points. You can see how those radius are controlled. If you just click and drag when you're making a star and don't release the mouse, you can just simply tab up or down with your arrow keys to increase or decrease how many points the star has. And you can actually go all the way down to 3, which is again another really simple way to make a triangle. I want to review the brush tool next. So the brush tool, similar to Photoshop, you can just draw. However, when you're done drawing, you'll see that it converts it to a path with anchor points. So of course, with the regular selection tool, you can move this around, you can scale it. And with the direct selection tool, I can start manipulating these individual points and modifying the drawing that I made if I wanted to do that. So that's pretty cool. It'll show you those individual anchor points so that you can manipulate those individually. Now, because these are all rounded points, but by the way that I use my brush, each point is going to have a handle. You can see that here. And that influences the curve of each of those paths. And this is something we'll review a little bit more with the pen tool as well. But these handles are how you can control how the curvature of this works. And of course, as I mentioned before, you can always remove some anchor points with that option up on the top. All right. So generally, I would tell people to use the brush tool if they want something more organic. So maybe we'll just, I don't know, I'll make a quick tree or something. I'm just going to draw a beautiful treetop. Okay, and let's do a trunk. All right, and I can use my direct selection tool. You can see my rounded points here. Of course, if I wanted to, fluff them up a little bit more with my direct selection tool, I can choose to kind of do that. And with my direct selection tool, if I have this selected, I can swap the fill and stroke, and now we have our tree filled. We can do the same with its trunk. Of course, I'm going to want to move that trunk to behind the green object. Whenever you draw a new shape or path in Illustrator, that will be what's on top. So I would just right click on this and go to Arrange and Send Backwards or Send to Back. You can see here that the shortcut is Command Bracket. And now we've moved the tree trunk to the back of the tree. Of course, the objects can still be manipulated individually, and that wouldn't really be ideal for working for this anymore. You can group them together. You can select them all by dragging and clicking with your direct selection tool. You'll see here that it has selected both shapes, and if you right click and select group, now our object is grouped together, so I can manipulate them together. It can move as one object. You can always ungroup by right clicking and selecting ungroup if you want. So as I showed you before, you can of course duplicate it by holding down Alt or Option and dragging and clicking. And you can do something pretty simple, to transform it. Perhaps we'll just do a vertical rotate, a vertical reflection. Okay, now we have two little tree shapes here. Okay. Let's see, I can add a sky and some ground. So maybe I'll make a shape here. I'll, maybe do something like that. And then I can maybe make a sky. Oops. All right. And I'll make this sky colored. All right, now we have our little scene started here. Okay. We could even go further to, oh, I use the rounded corners. I hate that. Let me fix that. I want the rectangle tool. Nice green grass. Push this to the back. And then I will do another rectangle up on the top here for our sky. All right, great. So now we have, you know, a little scene starting here. You can, of course, you know, continue to modify this. I think that I want this to be down a little bit more, you know, and you can change that however you see. So maybe, you know, you can use the brush tool to make, I don't know, a river or a path or something. You know, a stream. And I'll just draw a little, you know, wonderful stream. And I'm going to use the pen tool to connect these points together. Okay, so I'm going to select this. And now that's going to be one shape here. And I want to also connect the bottom points here. Okay, and now we can also fill that, and we have our little stream here. And of course, with the direct selection tool, as I've said before, you can always, you know, modify how you want your stream to look. Ooh, I don't like that. With these little points here. Okay. Of course, we can add our text here. We'll just click something on the top here in this space, and you'll see that our properties panel is open for our text options. So we can pick, you know, whatever text you have in your libraries here that you might be wanting to use. And you could always change it to whatever you want by downloading, you know, a font that you're free to use from, you know, something like DeFont or something like that. And you can, I don't know, title this. All right. You can make it bigger. You can change the color and its stroke, of course, right? It doesn't have a stroke right now. It might honestly look terrible with one with this type of font, but let's, yeah, it's a little silly, but all right. So you can add a stroke. You can see here with our layers here, you are able to lock certain ones. So let's say I don't want to ever have the sky move. I can lock those rectangles, as well as, you know, whatever you want, similar to Photoshop, as well as turn them off, with your little eye icons. Obviously, you can see how hand drawing certain things can look a little amateurish. It's useful to know. I just wanted to show you, you can't even really see this. Let's make it a little brighter. I just wanted you to see how to do that. So let's look at the pen tool next. Each time I make a new layer, there's a new color associated with it. So I'll show you, if you're working with objects on your layers, you can see here how the layers are corresponding to a certain color. That has to, it's letting you know that it's reflective of layer 3, as layer 3 is green. You know, if we were to go over these objects here, they would be red, and of course our original objects are blue. So it's a nice way to see how the layers are organizing your shapes for you really easily. So let's select the pen tool and work with that next. So you can see the difference with the pen tool and the brush tool is I can click and make a point, and you can see exactly what line segment will be produced if I were to click a point again. So I can use my pen tool to do that. So wherever you see that segment is where your anchor point will go next. So then I just clicked here to make a rectangle, and of course you can still swap this if you want to fill that and change the stroke color, all of that stuff, right? If I wanted to make something rounded with the pen tool, I could click a point. And as I click my second point, I will click and drag, and you can see that I'm starting to get a curve here, and I'm using these handlebars to control the curvature of that line. You'll see that the next line that will come off of it, if you were to make another point, is also curved. And sometimes that's kind of going to wreck your vibe. So what you have to do is when you're done with one point, you hold Option or Alt and click that to turn off the particular curve of that line. And now you can start a whole new curve if you wanted to do that. Okay. So now we kind of have this like football type of eye shape. Let's make an eyeball. So now I'll use my ellipse tool, and I'll make a circle. You can of course fill that in if you wanted to do that. We'll make some blue eyeballs, and of course you can Alt drag that to duplicate that, and maybe we'll just make us a little bit smaller. I'm going to hold Shift to keep it nice. And now we have the inside of her eye as well. So, you know, and of course you could group this together and make, you know, let's make this a little smaller. And you can of course duplicate this. Now we have 2 eyeballs. You could, of course, you know, use the pen tool, and we can give it a little wink, maybe. Oop. A little happy wink. I don't want it filled at all. Right, and now we have our little winky face here. You know, you can continue to make a smile. You know, you can, of course, control this with the points as well. Maybe you'd want this shape to be a little bigger. All right, you can give it eyelashes, whatever. All right, so really the power of the pen tool is for tracing things, and you can make really complex graphics from images. So I'm going to click and drag an image onto my artboard. Okay, it's giant compared to the artboard itself, so I'm going to scale it down. Okay, and now it's on our artboard. So, you know, being that Illustrator is a vector-based program, Illustrator doesn't really like images. It will import them and let you work with them, but it doesn't really display them the way they're supposed to be seen like Photoshop does, because it's just a render of an image and doesn't have those pixels. All right, so before I trace this, I'm going to crop in the sides a little bit. Great. Okay. So I have everything off. I'm going to make another layer. Oops, I'm going to make another layer. Okay. And I'll grab my pen tool. I'll zoom in a little bit. I'm using the space bar to get my hand tool up to move. Okay. And I can start anywhere that I really want. So I'm just going to begin here and start tracing my leaf. As I mentioned before, while you're working with these curved paths, you're going to want to use Alt or Option between every click to make sure that you're really getting the shape that you're looking for, that curve that you're looking for. So I am doing that between all of my clicks here. Whoops. Good. All right, and I'm just going to slowly go around this leaf and trace him. So using the pen tool takes a little bit of getting used to. It may be a little frustrating at first to use, but it is really a great, it's a pivotal tool for Illustrator, really. It's a really great tool for outlining things. And I honestly use it in Photoshop as well. Every so often to trace a subject. So I'm just going to continue to do this so that you guys can see a finished product. Whoops. Let's see here. Okay. So again, I'm using Alt or Option click and clicking on my anchor point between each one so that I can control my curved line here. Almost done. Okay. Awesome. I'll just get this stem. Okay, and now we have our closed path. All right, so it's not a total perfect accurate representation of the outline, but I did a pretty good job. And now we have our traced leaf. Let's make this a black stroke, 1 point black stroke. All right, and we have our leaf outline. You can see all of the individual anchor points, right, that we made. And of course, you can always modify that by selecting some and moving those around, pushing and pulling those, you know, if something's overlapping or something like that. I'm going to turn off this layer, and now we just have our leaf here. And I'm going to fill it maybe a nice orange color, brown. Okay. To add texture, you could, of course, use gradients or be outlining where the veins are. Things like that. We can always overlay colors. So let's make a copy of this. I'm going to hold Option or Alt and drag this over. And I'm going to make this one maybe... maybe a lighter color. And we can work with blending modes with this fashion in the transparency layer where we have our selected subject or object here, and you can start playing with how different blending modes can start giving it some pretty cool effects depending on which blending mode that you want to use. Maybe give a little bit more three-dimensionality or color play. So you can really play with that to see how it may affect, how your subjects overlap each other and how colors can be modified. It pretty fun. And of course, if we're pretending that this is a podcast cover, I could of course make a background. I don't know, I'll make it like a super dark green. And I'll move it to the back. Maybe we can just move these guys over here. All right. Maybe I want to change the color of this. All right, you can see that a little better. And you could type, whatever you would want here. And, again, you could modify that text however you would really want. Maybe we need something else besides this. Let's see. Chalk duster. Maybe we want this to be white. Maybe not. But you get the idea here that we're working with. Okay. That about covers everything. I showed you some simple techniques to be able to use Illustrator to complete your assignment. We reviewed the type tool, the shape tool, the brush tools. We reviewed, a little bit with the gradient. And remember that you need to sketch out 10 ideas before you work on this. If you really like your sketches, trace them in Illustrator, right? Take a scan or take a picture with your cell phone and bring it to Illustrator and trace it and work with it that way. Good luck. Reach out if you have any questions with email or Canvas, and have a good time.